I'm Abby McHugh-Griffa, Executive Director of the Climate Solutions Accelerator. I'm not the one who you came here to hear from today, so I'm going to keep my remarks super brief so we get to the good stuff. The purpose of today's webinar is to get an introduction to BlocPower, what they do, how they do it. This is work that I find very exciting and inspiring, and we're hoping to bring them to Rochester. So the goal really is to get others excited about what they do as well, so we can find some projects here locally for them. But the benefits of beneficial electrification technology, we'll be talking a little about that, and then the engagement process and how to get started. So the actual agenda, we'll do some introductions. We'll go over what the AMPED campaign is super briefly. BlocPower will take up the bulk of our agenda today. We'll have some time for Q&A. Again, if you have questions, please use the Q&A function for those, not the chat. We'll talk a little bit about AMPED resources and then what some next steps are. And the AMPED campaign, if you're not familiar with it already, is focused on mitigating the impacts of climate change by reducing carbon pollution caused by fossil fuels through the promotion of beneficial electrification here in the Genesee Finger Lakes region. This has been a very collaborative campaign from the beginning. Oh, I can't go forward. There we go. Some of the funders include our organization, Greater Rochester Clean Cities, and the City of Rochester. And then our steering committee involves a really wide range of partners representing quite a few different perspectives on what it's going to take for our region, especially commercial entities in our region, to pursue beneficial electrification. And we've also had some support from a lot of creative partners here. And yes, and Causewave. Thank you to Causewave for all they do, including coordinating these webinars. So I just wanted to call them out specifically. So our presenters today are Bryant Elder, the VP of Sales for BlocPower, and Claire Doyle Dowd, BlocPower's Director of Policy and Community. And I apologize, my cat and dog are fighting in the background, so you might be able to hear that. But I will be quiet now and put myself on mute and just hand it over to Bryant and Claire so they can tell you about the work that they do. Go ahead.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Bryant and I are honored to speak with you all today about BlocPower's work with local communities. And we'd like to thank AMPED, Causeway Community Partners, Climate Solutions Accelerator, Greater Rochester Clean Cities, and of course the City of Rochester for the opportunity to introduce BlocPower to you all. The Rochester area is very special to me on a personal level. I grew up in the region, and I was actually just there last weekend during that big heat wave to enjoy my daughter's graduation from the University of Rochester. So I just love the community, and I continue to be amazed at the robust community partnerships in this region. So we'll move on to the next slide. Today, Bryant and I will cover BlocPower's mission and our products and services, our financing model, the benefits to developers, building owners, tenants, and also discuss our workforce program called the Civilian Climate Corps and BlocPower's engagement process with communities. Next slide. BlocPower's mission is very special to me, and I know to Bryant and everyone at our company. We are fully invested in the mission and the work that we have at hand. Our mission is to electrify every building in America. BlocPower's CEO, Mr. Donald Baird, grew up in Brooklyn in an apartment with no heat. His family would turn on the gas burner and open up the oven door. Has a heating source, and he has very strong memories of his father reminding everyone that the oven produced carbon monoxide, and the family would open windows to let out these noxious fumes and to heat the apartment while being able to kind of have a healthy environment, so to speak. Very ironically, it was a real pivotal moment in his childhood, and his early career focused in the Brooklyn area as a community organizer. He fine-tuned his business skills at Columbia Business School, and the blend of his business acumen, his community organizing background, and his childhood in Brooklyn led him to found BlocPower in 2014. Next slide. BlocPower is a Brooklyn-based climate technology company that is focused on analyzing, financing, and installing efficient all-electric energy equipment in low and moderate income buildings. So far, we have upgraded over 1,200 buildings across New York City. We have energy efficiency and electrification in over 25 cities. Our focus is on bringing electrification to low and moderate income communities, while also amplifying the community-wide health and climate benefits of an electrification strategy. Our software platform, lease offer, and community Wi-Fi programs and dedicated workforce development programs mean that customers get energy savings, improvements to their building at no upfront cost. Our partners in New York State and in states and communities around the country include utilities, local governments, and private capital partners, and also philanthropy and community-based organizations. We are focused on an environmental justice perspective in how we operate, hire, and work in communities around the country. And we'll move on to the next slide. Bryant?
I done mute myself. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. Again, I'm Bryant Elder, VP of Sales with BlocPower. I don't have I can't say that I lived in Rochester like Claire, but I guess I graduated from Colgate, which is up in Hamilton, New York. So that's technically closer to you all than it is to me. So I do have some connection to the upstate New York area. So again, happy to be here. In terms of our turnkey building electrification program and our solutions, through our electrification programs, we focus on reducing emissions, but also helping to solve 3 compounding issues in the communities that we work in, very important to us, which are to upgrade buildings, to build healthy communities, and to create good, clean jobs. How do we do that? Again, offering a turnkey solution and a one-stop shop. Starts with our data and technology, Block Maps, which is a one-stop planning tool to electrify buildings and neighborhoods and cities. And we'll touch on it a little bit throughout my later on in my part of the presentation. Obviously, financing, which is very important to us, which we can offer. We'll touch on that as well as taking advantage of whatever incentives are available in your market. And finally, being community-driven enablers, creating jobs, good paying jobs, skilled labor through our workforce development program, which is also an anti-crime program, if you think about it too, especially down here in the city with things that are going on. So that's our overview and our overall what we bring to the market. Next slide, please. As Claire touched on, our goal is to build healthier communities. Studies show that we spend up to 90% of our time indoors, right? And if you think about it, with COVID, especially the past couple of years, it's probably ringing true, between working for a lot of us, obviously home life, all, food, gathering, families, all those things are done indoors. And on top of that, across communities, large urban communities, these buildings are aging. And that's also has a negative effect as these buildings are burning fossil fuels like oil and gas to heat our homes and et cetera, as Claire talked about with Donnell growing up and a lot of the rest of us. These large, old fossil fuel burning buildings are contributing 30% of greenhouse gas emissions to our environment. So they need to be addressed. And how do we do that? Next slide, please. First, we address what we call the inefficiencies in the marketplace and the complexities. And what does that mean? For example, as a building owner, if you were to look to upgrade your building, there are all these different areas that need to be addressed for you to have a seamless, efficient, cost-saving upgrade, to include engineering. You need to hire an engineer to do all your filing. Any local, what we call Department of Buildings, but any municipality that handles that stuff, you have to deal with them. You need to have someone else to deal with the construction contractor. And when you're talking about electrification, it's not just one contractor. It could be a plumber, it could be a mechanical contractor, it could be someone to do the decommissioning of your boiler, remove your tank if it's an oil burning boiler. So you need to have someone work with that. You need to be able to purchase the equipment. Nowadays, with supply chain issues and pricing going up, on a side note, they're saying that during this recent inflation, construction costs are up on an average of 17%, which is also factored into equipment purchase. So you need to manage that. You need to handle your financing and work with a lender. Utilities, there are lots of incentives out there, but you need to know how to navigate through those incentives, and more importantly, wait for that money, which we do, and I'll touch on that. And then also other government incentives. So as you can see, there's a lot of fragmentation out here in the market, potentially miscommunication, misalignment, and the process overall is very inefficient. It can drive up the project cost as much as 80%. So that's the problem. Next slide, please. So how do we solve that? As we touched on earlier, by being your turnkey one-stop shop solution. You have BlocPower and you have the building owner, and we're your one-stop shop. We take care of the engineering. We have engineers in-house, MEPs in-house that can take care of that stuff for you. We have construction department here. We can take care of that, and we can manage the various subs as your one-stop point of contact. We can take care of the equipment purchasing, and which is especially key nowadays with supply chain issues. We're working on quite a few national account deals with some of the most prominent equipment manufacturers out there in our industry, which enables us to get preferred pricing, preferred stock positions, and also access to their what they call diamond/platinum contractor networks, which are factory trained contractors. We obviously we act as the lender and the investor in your project. And again, we work with the utilities. Very important. It's a very complex problem thing to work through, and lots of paperwork and follow-up and calculations. And the most important thing that we do is we take on the incentives. So if your project is, say, $100,000 and includes $20,000 in incentives, we'd only charge you the $80,000, and we take on that $20,000 incentive and not have you have to wait for that. And trust me, they don't pay us quickly. So that's another benefit that we bring to the table, and also government incentives. On top of all these things that we do as a one-stop shop, we also have software, project management, things that we do to keep costs low and to manage the process efficiently. And again, offering the financing. As I mentioned earlier, 17% average increase in construction costs with this recent rise in inflation and what's going on in Ukraine. And so by offering this financing, it's a good way to minimize your out-of-pocket expense. Next slide, please. What do? We deliver comprehensive projects to you, right? We can, by offering all of the above suite of services that we bring to the table, which to include air source and ground source heat pumps, heat pump water heaters for your domestic hot water, home appliances and energy upgrades, lighting upgrades, project planning to put this all together. We can also talk about remediation. So I have my office phone. Let me just get this. All right. Let's talk about remediation of lead, mold, and asbestos, monitoring and control systems, local solar, community solar, battery storage, and incentive sourcing as well. Again, keeping all these fragmented, disjointed data sets in one streamlined place is what we bring to the table to bring down, to improve the efficiency on the project. And all these things that we talk about, by the way, air source, heat pumps, potentially appliances, LED lighting, monitoring, we can all lump that into one payment through our financing program as well. Next slide, please. So to sum it all up, we basically we basically bring you the benefits of electrification in the form of a 15-year contract. We can target your payments to the savings. So in other words, the amount of money that you potentially save by investing in a more efficient energy system, as well as with the incentives, could potentially be exactly what you're paying us back monthly. We have a low 1% annual escalation in payment, full guarantee on all equipment, maintenance included for the entire 15 years, and you have the opportunity to purchase, renew, or remove at the end of your term. And there's no lien on the underlying property, which is key for our finance programs. Benefits to you are no upfront capital need to take action, easy entry to learn about unfamiliar technology. The system is guaranteed to function throughout the life of the lease in the finance period, and there's significant savings compared to oil especially, and there are some savings depending on the age of your gas boiler. Next slide. Next slide, please. So again, we are a one-stop shop for building owners, and it's a very simple process. We have go log onto our website, and I can forward the link to Sarah, and she could pass it along to you all if you're interested. You go in, you enter your building's address, and you'll get what's called an instant building report, which gives you an estimate range on what the cost could be, as well as any incentives that are available to you based on your market, and gives you the opportunity to book an appointment with one of our business development reps for immediate follow-up. So we make the process very seamless and user-friendly. Next slide. I think I'm turning back over to Sarah. I'm sorry, to Claire.
Thank you, Brian. We've mentioned our workforce program earlier, and we call it the Civilian Climate Corps. And BlocPower is not only working to eliminate waste of energy in buildings and reduce greenhouse gases, we are also solving for the waste of human potential. In 2021, BlocPower launched the Civilian Climate Corps program. It's a workforce development program in New York City in partnership with the mayor's office. The gentleman in the photo here is one of the participants in this program, and he has a camera that you can't quite see at the top of his work helmet, construction helmet, which is a program that we have with a company called AMPED, and they are a construction program developer that is looking at construction through a unique software program. And this gentleman has been trained in learning how to use this program and is working in a very robust way to drive down project costs while also building his skills. Next slide. Yeah, the Civilian Climate Corps develops career opportunities for participants from historically left out environmental justice communities and communities that have been burdened with environmental injustices, including contaminated soil and terrible air quality in some of the buildings. We provide wraparound services and support services to ensure the success of the participants in these programs. And you can see here with the personal case management, which is an essential component of this, which is some skills and background in kind of the workforce may not be what many of the participants have traditionally had in their career, in their life, and their childhoods and their young adult lives. And so we blend both personal case management and career readiness training through these services and work in delivery of these with community-based organizations. So you can see here, we provide childcare support, counseling, social services, logistics, supplies, just working on resume workshops, interview prep, really building a virtuous circle here to get these folks into the clean energy workforce. Next slide. So across New York City, our skilled workers are now employed with HVAC companies, air quality monitoring startups and rooftop solar installers. The plan was to bring green jobs to neighborhoods, particularly in frontline communities, disadvantaged communities that have been hardest hit by gun violence and incarceration. BlocPower has trained over 1,000 individuals from these communities that have been adversely impacted by gun violence, and have provided training in green jobs like heat pump installation and other energy efficiency measures. So you can see here we have a continuum of our approach of a foundational building, having OSHA certification, developing specialization opportunities even in EV chargers, and I've referred to air quality startups that BlocPower is partnered with, and then providing on-site work training. The gentlemen you see and the ladies, we have a fair number of women who are in this program as well, about 30% women, are obviously installing solar panels. I believe that this was on the roof of a church in Staten Island. Next slide. And finally, the last slide here is on public-private partnerships and engagement with BlocPower. And Bryant and I are engaged, and so are our colleagues, in working with communities around the country. We know that there are many cities and communities like Rochester that are excited about partnering with BlocPower. BlocPower brings together resources to make it happen. Our turnkey solution, as Bryant referred to before, working with community-based organizations for workforce development. And another important component is our local advisory board, our local community advisory board. We have this underway in the city of Ithaca, where we're working as the program manager for an ambitious citywide decarbonization initiative that the city of Ithaca named BlocPower as the program manager for. And in this community advisory board aspect of our partnership with the community, we essentially have almost a listening and engagement tour. And we've had about 75 to 100 meetings with local community leaders. And it speaks to our approach in every community, which is not to just plow ahead and run programs, but to engage, listen, and customize our approach to the focus and interests of every community where we work. And I think that is one of the differentiators of BlocPower's approach in this important endeavor. So the next slide is just our contact information and some links that we have to some case studies from our website and some other information. And with that, I think we are done with our presentation. So thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. So it is officially Q&A time now. And so I'll just stop sharing the screen so we can see each other's faces a little better. I see we have some questions in the chat, some questions in the Q&A. I'm going to encourage people, if you do have questions, put them in the Q&A just so I don't miss them. But starting off from Dave Benetti, who I know is a real champion for electrification in buildings. He asks, who qualifies for the program? And I think, Dave, that you were talking there about the actual buildings, but perhaps you're talking about the workforce development side too. So you can take that question wherever you want.
Is Dave going to clarify? Or do you want me to answer? Because as far as qualifying for the building, it's more of a general answer / promo. I mean, as far as qualification, the link that I shared with Sarah, which she'll be providing, if you go on and fill that link out, it'll tell you if you quote unquote qualify, but anyone really qualifies. I mean, Obviously, if you have an older system that's on gas, if you have an oil burning building, you quote unquote qualify. But anyone that wants an electrification upgrade qualifies. Now, again, depending on the size of your system, the age of your system and the condition would be, determine the savings and efficiency as far as an upgrade is concerned. But the incentives, now I don't know what your utility offers up in Rochester. We'd have to look at that. But the incentives generally are based on the equipment upgrade that you decide to go with.
And Dave has a follow-up question, which is, are there financial thresholds for homeowners? And I guess maybe building owners more broadly.
I don't know what you mean by threshold, but credit score minimum requirements. Well, obviously, yeah, we would do a credit check and and so forth. So yeah, within if you're offering financing, there certainly would be we certainly would check your credit worthiness.
I will
But I would,
say,
I would encourage you. I'd encourage you, David. Thanks for the question and the participation. I would encourage, if you do have some buildings, please, the link has been forwarded, fill it out, and that'll give you a good indication. It's pretty cool product. It'll give you a rough estimate. It'll give you whatever incentives are available in your area. And because Rochester is obviously part of New York State, some of the incentives we're aware of, but some we may not be. But at least give us a good start. We can go from there. And by the way, it's going to ask you how you found out about us. So please mention the AMPED webinar, and I'll make sure we'll get it over to the right person.
Claire,
Claire,
did
you
you
want to say
have
something?
anything on that?
oh yeah, I was just going to say that BlocPower does have more flexibility perhaps than other traditional financing partners, and that is part of our equity approach, but it's also part of we have a 15-year lease, which is as Brian has already mentioned, drives down the project costs over time. When you're spreading that out, it's almost I suppose akin to a mortgage payment, but it's we do have more flexibility perhaps than others.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up question. This one's actually coming from me, but I think might clarify some of what Dave is getting at and some of what I see in the chat too. And that is, how does BlocPower prioritize buildings, and what is block maps? How will block maps be used?
So Block Maps is a software program where we have mapped every building across New York State. And we are able, when a building owner is, if you imagine, it's similar to a SimCity type of software, and in many ways, where you can enter a building address and you can toggle. If you're interested, like for example, from a city perspective, a city program manager could look at the map of, say, Rochester and put in different attributes of looking for buildings that are pre-1900, looking for multifamily buildings, looking for buildings that are on oil. And then what will emerge in the block maps will be the buildings, actual buildings, and then you can toggle around with energy efficiency improvements and measures, and understand what the cost would be, what the reduction in greenhouse gases would be. And so it's a very useful tool, both from an umbrella perspective, from a manager's perspective of a municipality, a state, as well as a building owner. Brian, do you want to mention how the building owner uses that?
Yeah, again, it's the IBR. You go in, you type in your building address, and it just spits everything out specific to your building. And if for some reason someone asked, who qualifies, I guess again, if you have a new system, let me take that back. If you have a brand new system, like at the end of the day, we don't expect you. We'd love for you to upgrade. If you have a brand new gas boiler, right? It's probably not going to be cost effective in terms of from an efficiency standpoint. So what we probably would say is you don't technically qualify, but if your commitment to the environment leads you to want to make this upgrade, we'd be happy to provide it for you. So hopefully that answers your question in terms of prioritization. But again, you go on, you fill out the intake form, and we move forward, you know?
Okay, so would I be correct to then, if I were to sum that up, any building could be a candidate? Am I getting that part right?
Any building could be a customer, yes,
But
class candidate.
for some, it's going to make more financial sense in the short term than others.
Exactly. And but for the majority, because again, the majority of the buildings, our infrastructure are older anyway, and burning, and burning dirty fuels and creating, GHG. So the majority will qualify, because of just the infrastructure. But if you have a newer system, then it won't be as desirable to you to upgrade.
We
Great.
traditionally have not done large, industrial properties, like large, old factories, for example.
That is a good point. We're mostly multifamily residential. Factories, I mean, we could, but as far as realistically moving forward, in a more timely fashion, our sweet spot is residential and multifamily, as well as some mixed use. You have a couple of storefronts downstairs on in a multifamily building. But yeah, we're multifamily and residential.
And I think you've done some schools and churches and that's.
Yes, we've done tons of churches. Great churches are our bread and butter. That's how we were started with churches. So we've done tons of churches and some schools. Yes, definitely.
Super.
And to manage expectations, as Abigail mentioned, we're definitely looking to make a move up in Rochester. We have some partners that we could tap into through our manufacturing network in terms of contractors. Some of the prep work we can do from here as far as the engineering and stuff. But in order for us to move forward, we would be looking to expand our contracting network. But we have the sort of model in place for doing those things. But I do want to manage expectations that if someone were to call me today and say, hey, I want to start this project tomorrow, there will be some work that we need to do to make that happen.
Right, because working with local partners is a priority for y'all.
It's a priority, and it's just easier. Like, we can't have one of our contractors from New York driving up to Rochester. But again, there are networks that we can tap into. We have a process in place to vet and source local contractors. And obviously, given this meeting and this introduction, we depending on the response we get, we certainly could look to fast track that. And also the other key is through our manufacturer partners, we could tap into their network of contractors as well. So for example, if you went with Fujitsu equipment, then obviously we have their list of diamond contractors that we could tap into in that area to partner with.
Super.
I see a couple of questions in the chat around workforce and some of the metrics. So I will just mention, and these are metrics from March 2022. We had, in terms of the participants, about 93% of the participants, of the onboarded participants, participated and attended the program. That may sound like it's obvious, but that's a huge metric in terms of performance. 62% of the participants completed the OSHA training. 53% of the participants cleared a bar of 90% attendance rate. And that's a BlocPower bar that was set. We do have some other data on reductions in gun violence in some of the communities where participants have live, and they've seen reductions in in crime in these neighborhoods. It's, of course, we cannot say, yes, this is because of the workforce program, but we have some of the participants have said, I feel important, I'm gaining skills, I am engaged in the economy, and that person is, has goals and ambitions for themselves where they might not have had that before, and some of them, many of them have been incarcerated in the past, and they are engaged in this work, meaningful work.
Super. Anything else workforce development wise that you all want to add on that?
I would just add that it has, you saw the picture of the gentleman on the roof installing solar panels. It is a way of reducing project costs when you have a participant who is in the program. They've met a lot of the objectives of the program. So they're not just doing work that is unrelated to BlocPower's work. They are doing BlocPower's work, and that is a way of reducing project costs.
Super. So switching gears a little bit here, what is being done to avoid gentrification in neighborhoods where homes are getting heat pumps or solar panels installed?
I mean, I don't know that the correlation is necessarily there. I mean, gentrification, I mean, particularly, I can't speak to Rochester, but I can speak to New York and Brooklyn in particular. Gentrification is a reality. I mean, there are things that are done outside of BlocPower to try to avoid that. But what I will say is that our focus is in communities of color, economically depressed communities, and that's how we were founded, and that will always be our focus. Our focus is to bring these upgrades, this technology, this clean energy to these neighborhoods, and that's what we focus on. I mean, if that causes the neighborhood to change as a result, I mean, that's certainly not our intention, but our goal is to focus on always have a special focus on economically depressed areas. That's how we were founded. I don't know if you want to try to answer it in another way, Claire.
Yeah, I think that I'll just briefly add on that we do have a very robust program in Oakland, California, where there are price pressures, but the local government, the city of Oakland, is very aware. The price pressures of housing is front and center in many communities across the country, but especially in high cost areas like in California. And so they, in creating some of the grant programs that BlocPower has applied for building decarbonization, they do have an awareness of this and how they craft their RFPs and their programs. So I think it's also important for local government to have that awareness as well.
And speaking of that, Oakland, I'm glad you brought that up, Claire. I was talking to, so we have this program, a couple of programs in Oakland. I was actually meeting with my California rep yesterday. We were talking about specifically going into local communities, church-based, community-based, because again, that's how our company was founded, to make sure that we're reaching the right folks in the community. We're not just going to focus on a traditional, data outreach program and miss out on these communities. So that is our focus. And again, to make sure that we don't leave the people in those communities behind from start to finish.
So a follow-up question, and this one is coming from me. This is my own personal interest question. Do you have any systems or processes in place for tracking, especially with multifamily buildings in particular, whether rents go up? And if that, as a result of the projects, or are there systems in place in the contract that guarantee that, rents need to be kept at a certain level for a certain number of years, or anything like that, to kind of address the previous question?
I don't know that we do. That is an excellent point. I mean, in New York, I mean, there's a lot of affordable housing and rent regulation that has that stuff in place. I don't know what they have in Rochester. But to say, well, if someone moves forward with this upgrade, then they bang the tenants with a rent increase. I mean, I guess that is possible. But on the flip side, you have a more efficient heating system, so you would save on that ideally. Otherwise, I don't think the landlord would do it. And you have a cleaner building. So is that possible? Yes. Do we have anything in place to, I don't know that we can do anything to avoid that, you know? I don't know if we could contractually say, well, you're not allowed to raise your rent if we do this. I mean, but again, there are benefits as well. But we, you know, and again, in New York, there's rent regulation, rent stabilizations, affordable housing that avoids that. So I haven't seen that here. I don't know.
I'll just mention just briefly, this may be coming down the pike, but with the low-income housing tax credit properties, you know, there are thousands of these in buildings in New York State. Senator Klobuchar has introduced legislation where that would allow for deep energy retrofits into what's called the qualified, the QAP that each state has, that determines how they, I'm just getting into minutia of LIHTC, but how they determine the types of retrofits for buildings that are tax credit properties. And that could be, we're hoping that will allow for deep energy retrofits with including electrification in LIHTC retrofit buildings. It's just being introduced in the Senate, and you know, I'm sure it sounds like it's pie in the sky, but when you look at there are millions of LIHTC properties around the country, and this could protect for the rent increase, because it's already a rent, they don't call it rent control, but there are rent tranches in these LIHTC properties that would assist in achieving electrification while maintaining the income and the rent rules for those properties.
Okay, so we are approaching the end of our time here together. So I want to thank you both so much for answering all these many questions and presenting to us. Again, I'm so excited about the potential of what BlocPower could do for us here in Rochester. I'm going to pull up my screen again for just a couple of minutes. We've got our little closing slides here to encourage people to engage with the AMPED campaign, with the AMPED resources, especially if you're fairly new to thinking about this idea of beneficial electrification and what it can do for you. So real briefly, visit the website. You can, right from the website, reach out, talk to somebody, and just, learn more about what would specifically make sense for your building, your situation. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing, as I think we've heard here today. So just to start to engage and learn about what the possibilities are. Also follow us on social media, of course, invite you to do that, where you would hear about things like, well, actually, I thought it was a different slide next. So I'll tell you about that in a minute. But at the website, you can subscribe for updates to stay in the loop. Also, I think Sarah has shared the link already in the chat, but as a concrete next step, we would love for you to see if your building is eligible for BlocPower, or if you know someone who owns buildings or works with buildings. I know just looking at the participant list here today, there are several people who either could do this directly or are connected to people who could take advantage of this right away. So we invite you to follow up on that. And today at 3 o'clock, in support of the All Electric Building Act, there's going to be a press conference outside of the Old Pueblo Grill over on Russell Street. If you weren't aware, that building does have a geothermal system, that complex right there. So there's going to be a press conference, and we'd love to have people show up. Warm bodies are appreciated, just to demonstrate that there is support for electrification and that we, would benefit from policy to support that. And we're going to go afterwards, maybe have some snacks and drinks. So there's a fun element too. And then coming up very soon, I think this next week, the Community Design Center is having a lecture on specifically what's happening in Ithaca. Claire and Bryant gave us just a brief hint at some of the work they're doing there, which is super ambitious. To learn more about that, we invite you to attend the Community Design Center event next week. And I think that's it on that slide. last thing I have to say is mark your calendars for the next Get Amped Forum on June 16th. That one will be focused on vehicle electrification. Of course, Amped does both, buildings and vehicles. So please plan to participate in that. And with no further ado, we're done. So thank you all again for being here, for participating, Claire and Bryant for presenting. We look forward to working with you